What do you know about the Sierra program?
Reckless mystery man you guys send in when you can't officially send anyone else.
It's a great man.
Lloyd. I got an urgent locate and destroy.
That could be fun. The man's got some street cred.
What's up, ShotDeck people? I am so excited to have this Shot Talk. These are incredible filmmakers that we have here today. Guys I know a little bit. One guy I know a lot of bit. We got the Russo brothers and Geoff Haley talking about their new movie, The Gray Man, for Netflix. It comes out Friday the 15th in theaters, and again on Netflix on the 22nd. The Russos are like two of the biggest filmmakers of all time. Box office, I don't know, it must be the best, if not you and Cameron duking it out. The only people that ever have $2 billion worldwide movies. That's crazy. Obviously Avengers, those two, the Captain Americas, they did Cherry, obviously did this, and are also prolific producers, including, which I guess I hadn't remembered from when I saw in the theaters, but Everything Everywhere All at Once you had a part in. So you're having a hell of a year.
We produced that, yeah.
Yeah, that movie's wild and really exciting, so congrats on that. And then the other gentleman we have here is Geoff Haley, who's an operator I've worked with many times. He was Operator of the Year for his work on Joker with me. We went back all the way to The Hangovers. He also did many films with the Russos, including Cherry and Avengers and now Gray Man and future ones. And also is an executive producer on this movie because he's also an incredible filmmaker, and they realized that, and we're like, you're more than just a cameraman. So we got all this talent, and let's just get into it. All right, we're just going to jump in. The movie is this incredibly big action thriller, kind of like, I had recently watched like 3 Days of the Condor, and it reminded me of that. It's got this cool CIA thing. It's got incredible fight scenes, incredible action scenes, and awesome actors involved. And we're just going to jump in and talk a little bit about it and how they made it, and some of the techniques and some of the stuff behind it. First things first, where do you guys start? And I know this is a pretty broad question, but just, the script, you probably were, had it in your sort of package of things that you're trying to get produced for a little while. When you actually go, okay, this is our next movie, what are some of the ways in which you prep? One of the things ShotDeck was built for was to help prep and production and all the way through post, but what are some of the ways you guys just like kick it off? Is it by watching a bunch of films? Is it, is it finding references? Just give me a little insight into some of the ways you guys start.
I mean, I think early in our careers, we probably would watch more movies. I know at Winter Soldier, we used clips from a bunch of different sources, including YouTube videos of, live action or, real car chases. There was one in Brazil where cops were chasing a fugitive who had escaped. That was really where we came up with the, Nick Fury car chase, where he gets into the sort of slow moving traffic. That was based on a YouTube video we found in Brazil.
A YouTube video of like something real, like where it's like
a real car chase where cops were chasing a fugitive, and he was flying down the freeway, and then he hit traffic, and then he started trying to push cars aside using his own vehicle. And he was in an SUV, and we thought, oh, that's interesting. Haven't seen that before in a car chase. So there's a moment in the Fury car chase in Winter Soldier where he gets into slow moving traffic, and he's trying to nudge cars aside using his SUV. So we'll look for real world inspirations. We actually there was a Captain America video game that we liked the movement of Cap in it. It was more parkour heavy. So we showed that to our stunt team. So we'll pull, from all different media, we will pull influences together. When we want to compose shots, we start in two places. Anthony and I have like an encyclopedic knowledge of movies. We watch a lot of films. We grew up as film geeks, and not just movies, media in general, TV shows, video games, comic books, play Dungeons and Dragons, go down the list. So we draw from a lot of different sources. And, sometimes we'll have clear ideas in the script phase of what the shot should be or what we're trying to communicate. But we, because we're collaborators, because we spent 25 years collaborating with each other, collaboration is a critical part of our process. We reject the auteur theory where, there are thousands of people involved in making a movie, and it's just not one person be walking around taking all the credit for it. And we like working with, collaborators, key collaborators on movie after movie. And Geoff is one of our key collaborators. We've worked on several films together for almost 7 years now, 8 years. A second part of our process is inviting the collaborators in and starting to have conversations about what they see when they read it. Third part of the process, location scouting, where obviously you get inspired by real locations, real geography, real cinematic aspects of locations that you're finding. So it's a combination of, the writing phase, imagination, collaborators, and real world locations.
Got it. And then in terms of where you peel off from the script, I'll jump right into the specifics of the movie, because one of the things I was really impressed with from a visual language of the film was the set pieces all had a distinctive sort of like visual sort of grounding point that in a lot of ways were things I've never seen before. And I remember thinking, oh, this has got to be quite technical. After the introductory scene, we end up in Bangkok, where like Ryan Gosling's character is like a sort of a gray man, of CIA operative merc that's sort of hired to do bad things. And it's New Year's, I guess, and there's an incredible fireworks display outside a massive window in which a huge fight scene happens. And then later they jump down onto a barge, which I've never seen before, is in the midst of like fireworks going off through silos. And there were two things that just technically, because I also go from a place of like being wowed by the movie magic and then wanting to get inside of it and go, okay, how are you guys doing this? Because you're not blasting off fireworks for hours upon hours, days upon days, but you're marrying them in a really seamless way, from both like obviously the lighting, and even though Stephen Winden, who's not here because he's working, is a massive part of that, of course. I'm just curious, like where some of those things, and then the atmospherics that come involved too, because there's a lot of atmosphere that plays into a bunch of scenes, and the way it interplays with the lighting. That fireworks stuff is super complex, where they're actually like against this massive window, which I assume is obviously added later, but the interplay on all the people is of course what you have to do on set, and it has to like cut seamlessly within cuts and all the rest of it. Maybe Anthony, talk a little bit about just some of the choices to like to make this scene exist in that environment.
Yeah, I'll start here, but Geoff should also jump in on this one because he does a lot of work on this level as well. So this is a good example of like how something evolves. Like there may have been like a sketch idea early on for the fireworks. I can't remember exactly, but that is certainly something that through the collaboration with Geoff and Steve, that idea was like expanded upon and expanded upon and expanded upon till you see this very elaborate sort of a visual design around it. And it was a complicated process. It was something we really liked. We loved the idea of the power cutting off,
right?
And the sort of the lighting transitioning to fireworks, so that there was like this staccato sort of access, visual access to what was happening. And a vision, I think even early on, it was more thought of as just, there wasn't as much color involved in the concept, but the color ended up really evolving over time into something pretty amazing. You want to jump in, Geoff? And
yeah, two quick things. First of all, as far as what you were just talking about, the color of it all, and this is a shout out to ShotDeck, because this was the first film that I'd ever looked at the very beginning of when we were all sitting down. Like Joe was saying, we have a session where some of the key collaborators read through the script and bring in lots of different materials, reference materials to start, figuring out what this is going to look like. What was so great about ShotDeck was that there are thousands and thousands of images that are all keywordable. So, Steve Winden and I brought in hundreds of images on ShotDeck to the brothers to be like, well, is it more like this? Is it more like this? How much color do we want to do here? And I remember Joe and Anthony coming up with like, okay, here's the rule. Because of some stuff that we found on ShotDeck, like every frame should have 2 different color temperatures.
Oh, cool.
Right? Now, do you remember Joe and Anthony?
I do.
That was,
I remember that. I mean, it was really, we were like, look, it's called The Gray Man. You'd already used gray in Civil War as a look. We weren't interested in heading in the same direction. We thought, well, it could be compelling if this character is in a world of color and he's forced to, hide in that world of color. Also, we wanted the universe to feel a little bit more chaotic, and vibrant that he lived in. So yes, there was a couple of key frames. Do you remember what they were from?
Yeah,
Geoff?
there was one that was interesting. It was from Children of Men. And it was a shot of, at the end of it, there was a rowboat that was sort of sliding out into the distance, and there was a light.
Oh, yeah.
In the distance.
A warm light in the distance, and it was cool.
Yes, with the cool.
Right,
right. And I think there was something else from maybe Blade Runner or something where, it was something like that. That started the conversation of just like, it's so interesting that there is something of a color that really shouldn't be of that color in that frame. Let's see what else we can find. And then we just found all these other examples of that scenario where you would see, again, different colors that wouldn't necessarily be together, that would be prevalent in each frame. And it was one of those things that Steve really took to heart. He was like, every composition he tried to bring different color temperatures in to bear for that reason. One other quick little technical thing about the fireworks thing, and this is just an amazing technical thing. What Steve and Bobby, the gaffer, did, they built these 35-foot LED fireworks trees. So imagine a 35-foot long, a tall truss that has LED lights running all the way up the stump, and then a big element like a T at the top. And because of what LEDs are able to do, he was able to emulate a firework going up with a certain color and then exploding with all these different other colors. And that was what was on the other side of this wall that turned out to be that back. And
then
background.
those got painted out, meaning
Yes.
he was able to put them in the frame, and then obviously
That's right.
that's
And then
really helpful.
Replaced with VFX that would, would match the color of the LED.
One
Yeah,
thing
well, I
that
thought
we-
about that because in cuts you're actually like maintaining, and I went, well, even if you could create a one cue and go, if you guys fight and do the same fighting move for 30 seconds, I kept thinking about the editorial and also the VFX having to match that, because it's not like you got to do it over and over and over again. It's like,
But I have to say, that was one thing I was really impressed about, was their ability to keep a sort of a marked timing about where we were in the scenes, whether it be through dialogue or action, either one, depending on the situation, and really sort of like be able to pick up the sequencing at the proper spot. It was kind of remarkable that it worked.
The other thing that I noticed, and I noticed it here, and I was a little like, whoa, I haven't really seen that. And then it became a bit of a visual language throughout the movie, was the idea of using FPV drones in the middle, like as a piece of coverage in the middle of an interior action scene or in the middle of an action scene, meaning as part of just coverage along with like handheld close-up work and wide shots. Suddenly the FPV drone is like basically doing a shot that is faster and more dynamic than a crane could do in a way
and it can go in smaller spaces, so it can give you. That's what we're compelled by, is how do you create a visual language that you haven't seen before on camera. Peter Jackson did that in Lord of the Rings. He had very swooping CG cameras. This gives you a similar effect, but in a real world environment where you can go under a bridge where a helicopter couldn't fit. You can go through, beneath a vehicle and around it. You can go through windows on a car. It's so small, this drone, that can fit in really unique places, go very close past it's also very light, so it could go very close past talent without really, the danger of truly hurting somebody.
And it can hit stunt people and they're fine. That's actually one of the great things about using them in fight sequences. You don't really want to hit an actor, but you know what? Some people have been hit by way worse, so we figure, it's okay.
Yeah.
Basically, it just bounces off. And did it hit a couple people?
Yeah.
Did it ever do? Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, those
actors, but...
those gamers that fly those things are incredible. I mean, they literally
it's
are.
not. I mean, how old is Johnny?
Johnny's like 21 or something like that.
21 years old. He stands there with a VR headset on set. He's got like a little, radio controlled joystick that he's working, and the thing's just whipping around. It's like a Jedi, sitting there with his eyes closed, operating this vehicle moving at 60 miles an hour in and around people. It's pretty impressive to watch.
And then turning that into the stitch, like at the hospital, that I thought was also interesting, something I hadn't seen before.
Like that was actually quite cool. I mean, let me just go to that scene, because that actually was one in which I thought, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. In the same way as people were doing Steadicam walk-offs off cranes and things like that, is later in the film when they go into the hospital. But it transitions in real time from outside into this lobby, and then blends in like what I assume is an edit between two things. Correct?
Yeah, these movies, the language of these films is, you usually have like wide scopy interstitials of the locations as you move from location to location. Anthony and I are just bored by that convention, and we wanted to do something more kinetic and more dynamic that would whip you from location to location in a way. And just keep the movie moving forward at a breakneck pace. How can we get camera to match what was going on in the storytelling? And it was Geoff's idea to get this drone and use it. And then we had to decide what we were going to use it for. We knew we were going to use it for the interstitials, but there were a few key moments of action that we thought it would also be really compelling. But my favorite use of it in the film is the hospital shot, as it winds its way through chaos outside a hospital after a major sequence where a lot of people got injured, and there's a handoff. I think was it handheld or your Steadicam, Geoff?
Steadicam, yeah.
Yeah, it was a whip. It was a whip into the actors that we stitched it into on a handoff from this drone going 40 miles an hour right into Geoff's Steadicam.
I will say this though about the drone, because that drone was so sort of new as a piece of technology, and then also extreme in terms of its effect. The three of us and Steve, we had an attitude of like, well, we're going to have to experiment with this a lot because we're not entirely sure this is going to work. So we came up with different spots in the movie where we wanted to play with it. And I do remember at some point it became a problem with production in terms of like the tension of how much time are we going to spend playing around with this tool that may be creating shots that are never going to be in the movie versus shooting it another way.
Well, but I said this to Geoff after I first watched it. And we spoke, as I said, it's enough in there that to not be like gratuitous and ridiculous, but it's like it is part of the language. And particularly, by the way, in establishing shots in all the cities that are presented in the film, because those, of course, you've got just sort of like precise Chris Nolan kind of aerials to establish a city. But the way you come off a street, come up and over a building, and then it's like Prague, that also was a bit of a dynamic way to introduce each one of these cities. That was like an energy burst that
and it hides where you're at until the moment of reveal. Like right. Berlin, it's going down a narrow alleyway, and then it turns a corner and lifts up high and reveals a CIA building to you. Or Prague, where you're zipping along the water, go underneath a bridge, and then turn a corner and get an incredible reveal of Prague. So it just keeps the forward momentum of the storytelling going.
And in a practical
really
sense,
fresh tool, yeah.
In a practical sense, just in the midst of making a movie, was it something where those drone guys could, like, you hit a city and go hit Prague. When we're in Prague, go find us and go shoot a bunch of dynamic sort of versions of that?
Yeah, it would be. I mean, at times it would be Geoff with them. We would.
Or Swen.
Yeah,
Swen, our visual effects guy, would take them out. Yeah.
We would rehearse the shots so we knew what they were. Or sometimes you say, all right, we have 3 ideas we like. Let's try all 3 of these and see which turns out the best.
Yeah.
And then we lent the speed drone to Spiro, our second unit director, who fell in love with it and proceeded to destroy it twice because, of course, he's crazy.
He's using it in the train sequence, to create really dynamic pass-bys of the train. So you have a train going 40 miles an hour this way, and you got a train and a drone going 60 miles an hour that way. You can get incredible motion as you do a pass-by. And you see that sequence is cut really tight, really fast. Everything's super chaotic and kinetic. And it's just the energy that Anth and I like. We get bored fairly quickly with.
And it's like,
right.
One, even if you, like, what's the other way to get that, right? You can't take a helicopter down that low, and you can't take a Russian arm or something that high or that fast. So it's like, at some point, it's actually a tool that is unique in that regard. So it's
Right.
really cool. That's one place in which you guys obviously went to Prague and you shot.
Yeah.
Is it like you're shutting down that entire square and just filling?
That was it was interesting. It was about I want to say between first and second unit, probably a 2-week long shutdown. And so you'll see that the center square was actually completely rebuilt by the art department.
Oh,
so
really?
What was there was actually the entrance to an underground parking lot. And so you'll see in that picture, you see a fountain, you see sort of that elevated, so with the stairs and so on, that whole square elevated thing with the fountain. That was all foam core and chicken wire, basically.
My gosh.
It's which is funny because it started to rain like toward the end of our sequence, and if you tilted the camera down a little too close, you would start to see the granite like turn into mush. But here's the interesting thing about that is because you have, the city of Prague is fairly gracious about letting you shoot and shut down streets, but 2 of those streets are major streetcar thoroughfares.
Well, that one looks like a streetcar lane runs right through the center of it.
It does, right? And so we had to negotiate with the city of Prague for when we could have a full closure versus when we had to let traffic through. And I don't know really what's worse for the poor people of Prague, having to drive around, this major thoroughfare in this major square, or driving right past it when 5 50 caliber automatic rifles are literally blasting, 10 feet away from you. It was one of those things. People on the radio were talking about this while it was happening because so much of that gunfire was 50 cal stuff.
Yeah,
you could hear it all over Prague. And I remember I got a little bit of heat exhaustion one day. And so I left early to go back to the hotel to basically sleep it off for the remaining
and now you were like a regular citizen. Like,
oh my God, you have no idea. Like, I closed all the windows 2 blocks away, and I couldn't sleep at all because of what they were doing with the shooting, and it was just absolutely crazy.
Let's jump into this. So, at some point, there's you'll see the movie, and these things will be illuminated as you watch them with the movie or after you watch it again and sort of listen to this. But the other thing I was really interested in what you guys were doing was the use of atmospherics. Like, even in that silo fireworks fight, you've got not just the fireworks going off, but when they fight inside the actual barge, you've got all the smoke and the sort of like actual sparks from that. But even in this like fight that's on this airplane, on this like bomber, in which Ryan Gosling has to sort of again escape people who are trying to kill him, the use of the sort of flare to like disperse this pink, which was a really cool color, smoke, and then fight within that. I also was starting to see a trend of like using atmospherics as a storytell, as a visual part of like the language of the film as well, and it continues all the way till the end in a really good way. I assume like things like that are maybe or not in the script or something, but there's stuff that obviously are part of how you take something from page to screen, but obviously involve all these parties. Talk to me a little bit about just, again, was it cordoning off each major set piece and thinking like, how is this one defined and different from the others? Because it also involves something that I assume, having done incredible things like going back to like TV, like Community and stuff, and then like ending up in these incredibly big, visual effects movies, is understanding what visual effects can provide. Like, does it change the way you think about, your storytelling?
It does. You can, it's more, your imagination can be a little bit more limitless in that regard. But, you're working on a movie with this many action sequences. We knew, and it was part of the dogma moving forward from the start of the film, that each one had to have distinction from the previous one. And you're right, like atmospherics have to be different, lighting has to be different, location, geography, all of that, style of fighting. Are we adding smoke and fireworks here? How are we shooting it to accentuate what the storytelling is and what's going on in this moment? Prague is completely different from the fireworks barge, right? It's, it's sort of hot light in the middle of day. Dust hits from all the bullets flying around. The tram sequence then has its own language where it gets even more frenetic and crazy. The third act on the assault on the chateau, nighttime, lit very differently, lots of yellow lighting being used throughout. So each one has a distinction so that you feel progression in the movie, and so that the story progresses. They're also there to service the storytelling. I mean, two guys fighting in the bowels of hell in a fireworks barge with explosions going off all around them, is a very operatic way to set up the idea that Six is about to be handed this very critical information from someone who happens to be his doppelganger, and he's going to find out that the last 20 years of his life have been a lie, and that he may be targeted for death soon. And so it's like his journey into the ninth circle of hell to get this information, and then he has to leave with it and determine where he's going to go from here. And so they do have a metaphoric or thematic resonance. They're chosen for those reasons. They tie to story or theme or character, and a lot of it is through discussions with the team. And not a plug for ShotDeck, but this is a plug for ShotDeck. It's the most efficient tool we have used to communicate with our team, because usually, and it's cohesive, right? So it's all in one place, and it can be recalled quickly, and it can be shared. And we find that it's an incredibly powerful tool to take the visual language, because a lot of us are referencing other films. That's what So we know the old adage, right? You don't borrow, you steal. We all steal. And it's good to talk about what other people have done, because it gives you ideas like, hey, let's make sure that we have two different colors in every front, two different colors via lighting in every scene of the movie.
And to your question about how we find those atmospherics, it's like, we kind of lay out every sequence of the movie, all the action sequences, and then or in scenes otherwise as well. And we just sort of start talking again with our whole team about, well, what's special about these sequences? What makes them unique? What's that sort of core idea in them that we're going to design everything around? And like sometimes it's an idea that sort of comes from the script, or even the book that the script was based on. Like, for instance, when he's in the square in Prague, when the gray man is handcuffed to the bench in the middle of a busy square, here's the gray man, a guy who can't be caught, who's in and out of the shadows, lives in the gray. All of a sudden, he's in a major city square, and he's chained to a bench, and there's a teams of assassins are on their way to get him, and he's completely exposed. Like, that's a concept that we build, that we design everything around in that sequence. When we're on the airplane, and Six is in a very small confined space that there's no escape from, because he's 30,000 feet in the air or whatever he is, and he's outnumbered by a large number of mercs. How does he survive in this kind of situation? And that, all of a sudden the smoke can came up in our process of development and rehearsals and talking about things as an idea of like, how does he hide? How does he protect himself in this kind of environment? And that ended up being a really key idea that we ended up basing a huge section of that scene on.
Well, one thing I would say also, just as far as the brothers, the way they work, which is very different from anybody else I've ever worked with, their methodology, they really aren't precious or beholden to the past. And by that I mean, if an idea is being worked out and it's not working, they'll be the first to say, it's not working, let's try it again. Let's try something different. And it's very interesting because so many filmmakers are so locked in to a notion of what something should be based on some way he or she has visualized it. And these guys are like, this is working until it's not working. And when it's not working, no harm, no foul, we're gonna try it again. And we're gonna try something different. And it's really impressive. I mean, it's jarring at the beginning because you feel like, oh my God, did we just waste a bunch of time? Well, no, we didn't, because we're gonna come up with something better. But it's a really unique way of working that I'm sure some studio heads at the beginning of working with them get a little nervous about, because they're just like, how much money did we just spend on something? But the better result comes from it, because they're not slaves to some other preconception. So I think that's really impressive.
It's an iterative process, but that's also critical to collaboration. You cannot use the great ideas that come through collaboration unless you're available to use them, unless it's the process is organic. And we try to stay available all the way through delivery of the movie. If we come up with a great idea 2 months before we're going to release the film and we have enough time to execute it, we will do it. If it's going to make the movie better or tell a better story. And I think that's an important part of the process. Where, if you use the metaphor, you're walking through the woods and you run into a tree, you can either cut it down or you can, take a right. We take a right. Right. And we start looking, hey, what's over here in the woods over here? Let's see what's going on over here. And so we find our way through the woods, and we do it as a group. There's like 10 of us all walking together, and somebody's saying, oh, I think I see a river over there. We get something to drink. And so we move as a group through the process, the creative process, in a very fluid and supportive way.
The other sequence, just because I found this to be, I mean, it's quite a long transition, but at the castle at night, which is sort of third act stuff, this transition into dawn, early dawn, middle dawn, sunrise, that happens outside, because I'm always interested, as you know, in sort of how do you use specific time of day as part of the backdrop of a section of a piece of a movie, or define the time of day in a way that it's like, I usually end up putting down like, this is at 7 p.m., this is at 10 p.m., even if it's not written out, to give myself the sense of like timeline of the story. And you guys do it in this like really cool way, which is, they go into this sort of maze, but then you come outside and you're like seeing the sense of like, oh, we're, I don't know, 20 minutes from sunrise to 10 minutes to 5 minutes to like actually the sun coming over the horizon, like where our two sort of guys that are trying to kill each other the whole movie are finally, in front of each other. But you said this was obviously not shot at that time of day, and some of it. So talk to me a little bit about the practical way in which you guys shot this, because it's super effective and you really track that rising sun in a way that I thought was super cool.
Yeah, I mean, the hedge maze was not at the existing location in Chantilly. It was something that was put into evidence in our aerials of the exteriors in France, but the entire maze was built again in our massive facility in Long Beach, and which was great, because obviously this fight sequence took probably the better part, between first and second unit, better part of a week, I would say, to get. And for me, and I think for I would imagine any filmmaker, you're always having to sort of ride the lightning a little bit, in that you run into problems when you are telling the story of something where you've got a ticking clock, but you have to cheat. you can't let the audience know that the amount of time that this thing that has a ticking clock on it takes actually longer than in the word it takes actually longer than what the audience is led to believe. We're sort of getting into weird, like, Newtonian physics here, because the ticking clock is every punch that is thrown, right? You can't have like little mini time lapses. When you're shooting a fight, it's punch 1 that goes into punch 3, that goes into punch 4, it goes into kick 7. And so you know how long it's supposed to take. So you have to figure out a way to make the audience forget that it takes longer than a 35-second fight for the sun to start underneath the horizon to go up to here, right? So you're constantly like hoping that the audience is either engaged enough in the fight or that they're not thinking about the fact that, okay, we've just witnessed something that had to be, because it was a fight, played in real time. There were no time cuts because it's a fight. You're there for every second of the event, yet in that event, you're supposed to believe that essentially the sun
like you
went
say,
up.
even 7 minutes passed when it needs to be 40 seconds or something.
Yeah,
but you know what?
right?
It's funny. I never tracked that. To me, the fact that like you're actually watching the sun rise over that time, in a way, also engages me because I sort of have a sense of time as well. I don't know. In a way, it helps. It helps it in a real way.
It does. I think you're right. I think it helps in the sense that there's a subconscious cue to say that time is passing. Holy shit, these people have been at this a while, and how exhausting must that be? And so I think you're right. It helps, like, feel the weight of the fight and of just how exhausting and grueling it is by basically telling the audience, like, it was dark when they started, and now the sun is up. Boy, can you imagine how exhausted they are?
That's right. Well, I think exactly what it is, right? You're like, they've been fighting all night to get to the
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a mini time cut. One of the other technically challenging things about this is that because you're going back and forth between first and second unit, Greg Baldi and Steve Winden had to be they had to have a very clear idea of where the sun was going to be exactly at what punch. And so I had never seen a sort of a pre-rehearsed notion of where light was going to be as specifically as that, because it had to be agreed upon by two different units shooting this fight. If any shot that is backlit where you can't see one of our two actors is second unit, is doubles, right? So that's definitely doubles shot.
Sure.
So you're having to get very specific. You have to make sure that they don't deviate too much from the fight choreography between first unit and second unit, because not only does that mess up the potential, the actual blocking of the fight, but it also messes up the lighting. It also messes up. The sun is going here and then comes down here and then comes back up here and goes here. So it's tricky.
Yes, I'm seeing that you guys have so many time. I know this. I have one question. Let me just ask one question. Because I want to talk about, because you have incredible performers here, incredible performances, and you have at the heart of this an emotional piece that I was really intrigued in just from a directing standpoint, because it was really effective for me, and it falls pretty, like, I don't know how 40 minutes in the movie when you meet Julia Butters' character, and it's not a very long passage, but in that small amount of time, it basically gives you the foundation for, one, wanting Ryan Gosling to get through this movie and caring about him deeply, and also caring about, like, why he needs to live and why other people do. It's not very long, but it's incredibly effective. And I'm just curious if, like, did you know that in advance that you didn't need that much to be effective, or is that something that you had to discover either through the edit, or did you have to do a lot more?
We discovered
Ryan Gosling
edit.
has like 20 lines in the whole movie. It's like he barely says anything.
It's a very samurai-esque lead character. That's the intention. That's why Gosling is so good at playing him. It's because he's great at subtlety and minimalism, and he can convey a lot of an interior. He can convey an interior life without saying a lot. But that's also part of the fun. Is that those are, like Samurai. Those are the movies that Anthony and I grew up on. That we now pay homage to and parody at the same time. That was a longer sequence.
I wondered that, but it's funny because you don't need that much, and it still can like pay off for the audience. Because I wondered, was it double, triple the time? Because you think, well, shit, if this doesn't get us on board, then we're going to struggle.
It probably had 3 more scenes, I think.
It might have been,
lost those 3 other scenes.
Might have been triple the time. Yeah, it was. But you know what? You know what the discovery basically came from? I mean, look, it's one of those classic things where when you have an actor like Ryan Gosling, he's conveying a whole lot faster to the audience than you would have anticipated and patterned for in the script. But because that character is so restrained in terms of his emotional availability prior to that point, the second you get a little bit emotional availability with her, you get, you get it very quick. Like a little goes a long way because you haven't gotten anything prior to that. So
yes, well, it was super effective for me. And I'm not going to do any spoilers, but near the end, you do an incredibly restrained version of a climax within a very emotional thing that I found really, really satisfying, and I loved it. So people have to watch the movie to see it, but you'll get there eventually. Right. Anyway, listen, I know you guys got to go. You got 1,000 things. The movie comes out tomorrow. Thank you,
Larry. Thank you.
Listen, you guys are great. Keep doing good things.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, man.
Carry on.
I feel bad because I feel like this is so fun. I wish we had scheduled a couple hours for this interview.
All right.
I'll see you guys tomorrow. Or talk to you.
Thanks for coming up with ShotDeck. It's an awesome tool, Larry.
Hey,
really is.
I'm glad you guys are using it. Thank you, and thanks, and keep making fun stuff for everyone to see.
Okay, great. We'll do it. Thank you, man.